Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another video. Last time we left off with From the Halls of Montezuma to the Shores of the Guadalcanal. Now on to Leathernecks Take Time Out en route to the front. September 1942. Moving up in jungle. A detachment of U.S. Marines pauses in a jungle clearing for a brief rest en route to the front on Guadalcanal Island. The Marine in the right foreground has attached to his helmet netting for use in camouflage. Okay. For camouflaging himself in the dense undergrowth. Shortly after this photograph was taken, these leathernecks drove an enemy band far into the hills. Commenting on the campaign in the Solomons, Admiral Ernest J. King, Commander-in-Chief of the United States Fleet on October 18, 1943, said, because the Japanese, through the subsequent weeks and months, were determined that Guadalcanal, with its Henderson Field, should not be lost to them, the whole story of what the United States Marines did there is one which is too big, too involved, and too valiant to be reported in a summary as brief as this. But the world knows by the Marines in their victory at Guadalcanal completed an ageless epic for American history. Yeah, they did a lot on Guadalcanal. It's one of those things that's not really... Now it's not really talked about as much, but it is important. If you go through this war, it's just a lot of people focus on the West, the taking down of the Germans. But we don't talk about the Japanese quite as much. We should. This theater is very important. Always got to make sure it's the right page, because sometimes these pages like to stick. Field Marshal Smuts addresses Parliament, October 1942. South African Premier visits Britain. On October 14th, Field Marshal Smuts arrived in Britain by air for important consultations with the War Cabinet. On October 21st, the famous imperial statesman and soldier received a great welcome from the members of both House of Parliament from whom he addressed at Westminster. In the courage of his speeches, he paid a warm tribute to the fortitude of the British people and the courage, foresight, and energy of its leader, Winston Churchill. The defense phase has now ended, he said. The stage is set for the offensive phase. In the picture above, the Field Marshal is seen delivering his address in the chamber. On the extreme left is late Speaker of the House, Captain Fitzroy. This guy right here. To the right are, here, Mr. Churchill and Viscount Simon. Lloyd George presided over the meeting. There you see. Yeah, it's nice to see all these people. And yeah, he's not wrong. The defensive war is pretty much over for them. They're not going to be on the offensive now more than ever. Yeah, there will be some defensive points, but on the whole, it's an offensive war by this point. Women's Land Army on the job in Britain. October 1942. Women gather the harvest. In a broadcast on October 11th, R.S. Hudson, British Minister of Agriculture, announced that the 1942 harvest in England had been the greatest on record. Britons started the war having lost 3 million acres of agricultural land by building and several 100,000 more new aerodomes and factories. Nevertheless, the area under crops had increased by more than half since the war began, and was, in fact, greater than in 1918. In the past summer, thousands of women had played an important part on land, tackling every kind of agriculture work. In this way, men were released for other duties. The pictures show a women's land army team cutting wheat on a downland farm in South England. A few years ago, this land was derelict, but the demands of war transformed the scene. Yeah, this is obviously invaluable work. Somebody had to do it, and these women stepped up and they did it. And like they said, it allowed the men to go fight. But yeah, the work of the women here is invaluable, really. Without them, no one's eating, really. They are the farmers right now, and so it can't be understated their importance in this war. They may not have fought like the men did. In some cases, there were women that did fight, but on the scale of the men, not as much. No, but they did do other jobs as well that are just as important. Fighting is not how you win a war necessarily. Sometimes outlasting the enemy is a way to win a war. And in that case, with these women's help, they did. Famine victims in China. During October 1942, a famine occurred in the provinces of northern Henan, which threatened about 20 million people with starvation. This was brought about by nearly 2 years of severe drought and a plague of locusts, unparalleled for centuries, which ruined the grain and rice fields. The blighted area extended over more than 20,000 square miles, and the districts which suffered the most acutely were along the Yellow River in the neighborhood of Chengchao, a town which lay only a dozen miles from the Japanese lines. While millions of people were able to leave the provinces for other parts of China, those who remained had to live on grass, straw, weeds, and even the bark of trees. The disaster was greatly aggravated by Japanese troops who had for a long period been systematically burning fields, crops, and villages in an attempt to put an end to the activities of the Chinese guerrilla bands. These gallant bands, in spite of many handicaps, had for long been a worry to the Japanese invaders. China was now in the 6th year of her war against Japan, and though she had lost much territory and had sacrificed countless of lives, her armies still stood firm in the path of the aggressor. The spirit of the country was still a glorious example for the world. So, this additional disaster of famine was born as bravery, as were all her other sufferings. China's plight, however, was a serious one, especially as the loss of the Burma Road supply route made it extremely difficult for American, Britain, and other allies to come to her aid. The picture shows one of the many thousands of poor victims of what was probably the worst famine in the recorded history of China. Now we can see this man and his young child. They haven't eaten for who knows how long, and they're probably suffering greatly. Like they said, it is horrible, and this famine does massive damage to the Chinese population, which is very unfortunate for those people. It's very unfortunate. Carrying supplies to Russia over the Arctic routes. October 1942. Winter conditions on the Arctic convoy route. On October 6th, the United States diplomatic representatives of Great Britain and the USSR signed a protocol covering deliveries of military equipment and war materials to Russia. The bulk of supplies had to be carried in convoys along the far northern route to Murmansk and Archangel, one of the most hazardous sea passages in the world. Apart from the menace of enemy submarines and shore-based aircraft, convoys had to fight their way through raging snow blizzards and seas infested with deadly ice flows, as the winter set in. My bad. These pictures of ice-coated decks on the ships of a Russian-bound convoy and escort give a vivid idea of the hardships endured. I mean, yeah, look at this stuff. Look how frozen everything is. The Arctic is very, very unforgiving. Any of these passages are, it's just dangerous to be there on these ships. You could freeze, like they said, crash into ice, things like that, and your ship is wrecked, and there might not be another person coming to get you for a while. So, yeah, the conditions up here are just awful. They're not war awful, but they're naturally awful. Nature shows its wicked dark side in these areas. But that's going to do it for this video. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a comment. Tell me what I could improve on. I always appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.